Hurricane along Florida's Big Bend region. But the heartbreaking devastation isn't done. The storm killing more than 24 people and leaving millions in the dark. Multiple states recorded more than a foot of rain as fierce winds ripped apart buildings.
We are continuing to restore and perform damage assessment, especially in those hardest hit areas that sustained flooding.
Urgent search and rescue operations taking place across the southeast, including this one just off the coast of Florida, where you see the moments a man and his dog were rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. Their boat became inundated with water as Helene inched closer to Florida's coast. Many people trapped in homes by flooding also had to be rescued in parts of Georgia and North Carolina. The storm left more than 50 people stranded on the roof of a Tennessee hospital Friday after rising floodwaters complicated evacuation efforts. Group's leader was reportedly stationed. The strikes flattened buildings in a densely populated area. The search for survivors goes on. Those are your headlines now. Here's a look at your weather on the ones.
Hey everybody, I'm meteorologist Nate Harrington. As we end the week on Friday and head into the weekend, the story will still be what's left of Hurricane Helene, a generational type flooding event for portions of North Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Not just the Gulf Coast impacts that we saw on Thursday and on Friday. Thankfully, not as much rain for folks across the Ohio River Valley, but still more rain to be seen over the weekend. Quiet weather for the rest of the country, and the tropics remain busy. We'll talk more about that in your forecast coming up.
Recovery efforts underway in for those along the East Coast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sharon Taz. West 4 states and emergency officials warn that toll could go up. The Category 4 hurricane made landfall Thursday, tearing homes apart and sending rescue crews on dangerous missions to save people from floodwaters. And the remnants of Helene are still wreaking havoc. Spectrum News anchor Carla Redditt has a look at just some of the devastation as millions remain without power.
This is still a very dangerous situation. Even though some of the storm surge is receding in Florida.
Boats on yards in front of homes, roofs torn off, trees toppled, vehicles crushed. Many Floridians are assessing Helene's punishing overnight blow while the threat moved north.
There's still so much that's happening across many states.
Potentially historic and devastating flood levels are washing across large parts of the southeast.
We're also trying to get the multiple structures right now that we know have individuals inside.
Multiple people remain trapped in buildings. Water rescues in that state and others have been essentially non-stop since Helene's landfall. In North Carolina, forecasters predict Helene's impact to be one of the most significant weather events to happen in the modern era for the region. At least 2 storm-related fatalities have happened there. Around mountainous Asheville, already saturated from pre-Helene rains, there are other threats.
I am worried about potential building falling and collapses and landslides.
The river just keeps coming up. I don't know when it's supposed to crest today, but
trees are down on roads everywhere. Don't get out if you don't have to.
Good advice echoed by just about every emergency management official.
You need to exercise extreme caution.
Carla Redditt, Spectrum News.
Parts of North Carolina are also feeling the effects of Helene. Our meteorologist Nate Harrington. And what are the biggest threats the system poses as it continues inland?
Well, the biggest threats, we talked about this earlier in the week. This was always going to be an extreme rainfall and flooding event inland. Obviously, the wind, the storm surge near the coast. But as the remnants of Helene, now a tropical depression, will continue to weaken, this is going to be another rainfall event. Thankfully, the rainfall rates won't be quite as high. Folks in North Carolina, the upstate of South Carolina, in North Georgia, dealing with historic levels of flooding. Seems like no matter where you go in North Carolina, someone impacted by this storm. And overall, it looks like the rain will continue in the Ohio River Valley. That's where we're going to see the most rain over the next few days. But the flooding will continue. The rain's got to go somewhere. All the water does. And through these rivers in the Blue Ridge Mountains all the way to the Gulf Coast, you will have continued flooding. 4 million people are without power right now from Florida up to Virginia. But we continue to watch the rainfall.
Quiet hurricane season, but it is far from over. So what can we expect to see the rest of this year? And tell us about some areas that we're watching right now.
Well, it's already starting to pick up. We have 5 named storms so far this month. We have Isaac and Joyce already out in the Atlantic. No threat to any land areas. And the same spot where Helene formed in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, looks like that's something the National Hurricane Center is going to watch. So it's not over just yet. We've got 2 solid months of hurricane season left to go.
All right, we'll keep our eye on that for sure. Nate Harrington in North Carolina. Thanks. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is already on the ground responding to the mess left behind from Hurricane Helene. And joining me now is Keith Turry, FEMA's Acting Associate Administrator for Response and Recovery. Keith, we spoke Thursday just before Helene hit, and thanks for joining us once again on yet another busy day. Where is FEMA?
Made its way up through North Carolina and is still putting some significant rain in Kentucky and Tennessee, and of course the floodwaters from the storm in those northern areas are still making their way downstream. So right now, across all the impacted states, our teams are fully embedded with the states and the local governments, executing on those initial response activities, and also trying to get the message out for those areas that still have hazards there to keep people safe. One of the things that folks don't realize sometimes is that the areas, the hours after a storm can also be very dangerous. Those floodwaters obviously are very dangerous to either not walk in, not drive in. And when you have power outages, obviously down power lines, and operating generators safely, all very important things. So right now we're working on those initial response activities with all of our partners, but also trying to keep that message out there to make sure everybody stays safe for the coming days as the remnants of the storm.
Doing over the weekend, where's the focus?
So in Florida right now, we're doing assessments. We have our search and rescue teams that are out making sure they're checking on people, making sure their people are safe. We'll start doing damage assessments, start figuring out what the impacts are to utilities, and figuring out what support the state and local governments need to get those utilities back up and running. And so the first thing you always want to do after a storm like this is, 1, make sure everybody's safe. 2, make sure those lifelines are stable so that those utilities and those resources the community needs can continue to flow. And then we'll move into what recovery looks like and what other types of assistance we might be able to provide.
Well, there's a lot that needs to be done in the short term. How about the long-term recovery efforts? How will FEMA offer support there?
Yeah, FEMA has a lot of different programs and things we can support. So we'll be able to help with the rebuilding of infrastructure, help with individual survivors with displaced. And so right now we're in that emergency phase, working on that stabilization. But in the long term, there's a range of programs we'll be able to support. It's going to be a long road for these communities. And unfortunately, some of them have been impacted previously. So we understand that. Our hearts go out to these individuals that have been impacted, these communities, and we're going to be with them for the long haul.
Yeah, a lot of widespread devastation. Keith Turry from FEMA, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Israel launched another round of deadly strikes in Lebanon's capital city. Just ahead on Spectrum News, what Israeli officials say was the goal of the latest attack.
The 2024 election will decide who leads our nation and the balance of power to the Oval Office. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth coverage, strengthening democracy by informing your community. That's our mission. Available on all of your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
What if you never had to worry about what you could do? Because you could do anything. Anywhere could be the center of everywhere. And boundaries only existed to be pushed. So the only limit you faced was how big you could dream. What would you do then? Some pretty cool stuff, I bet. Yeah, that'd be some life. That'd be life unlimited.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
Because fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kitchen now.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Spectrum News and your weather on the for how strong the storm was at landfall, a Category 4 hurricane, but what it did inland. Now, we saw devastating pictures along the Florida Gulf Coast and the Big Bend, but heavy rainfall late Thursday, early on Friday provided a historical flooding event for portions of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Atlanta saw their first ever flash flood emergency in the city. And you go up to the mountains of North Carolina, some of the worst flooding that area has ever seen. In some areas in North Carolina and South Carolina, the upstate especially, they saw 6 to 10 inches of rain. And if you know anything about those parts of the country, that can do a lot of damage. Not just the flooding, trees down, mudslides. It's just an absolute mess from what was left of Helene. And this is the rainfall just since Thursday afternoon, and they can expect a little bit more through Friday, not as much. But as we head into the weekend, low rain is what's left of Helene continuing to spin around the Ohio River Valley. So southern Indiana, southern Ohio, Illinois, portions of Tennessee and Kentucky seeing the rain from Helene. Thankfully, no severe weather. The wind threat is very minimal at this point, but it's going to be a very wet weekend for those areas. That area of low pressure is not going to move much. The next 24 hours, that's where all the rain is concentrated from Tennessee up to Kentucky and the Ohio River, mainly 1 to 2 inches of rain. And that could cause a little bit of flash flooding, a slight risk, a level 2 risk of flash flooding along the Ohio River in Indiana, Ohio, and in Kentucky. The rest of the country is very quiet. We'll see cool weather where the remnants of Helene dominate, but temperatures again reaching back into the upper 80s and low 90s out in the west. We talk about the rest of the tropical scene and your extended forecast coming up.
The Israeli military carried out another deadly round of strikes in Lebanon's capital Friday. The military says it struck the central headquarters of Hezbollah in Beirut, targeting the militant group's leader. At least 2 people were killed and dozens others were injured. There are no reports of the Iran-backed group's leader being killed. The latest attack comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the UN General Assembly in New York, saying his country would continue its military operation in Lebanon.
Ladies and gentlemen, the real war criminals are not in Israel. They're in Iran. They're in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen.
The UN says more than 100,000 people have been displaced by airstrikes since the conflict in Lebanon began. The mayor of the nation's Eric Adams appeared in court Friday. Spectrum News anchor Robert Guadarrama is here now with more on the arraignment. So, Robert, what happened inside the courtroom?
Sharon, our crew inside the courtroom says that the mayor didn't show too much emotion and was seated facing forward at the defense table, looking straight ahead, occasionally turning to speak with his attorney. But the judge asked for his plea, and Adams told the judge, quote, "I am not guilty, Your Honor." Here's video of Adams arriving to the courthouse in Manhattan Friday morning. He's the first sitting mayor of New York City in 150 years to face criminal charges. Here they are. The 5 counts laid out in the 57-page indictment include bribery, accepting illegal campaign contributions from foreign sources, and wire fraud. According to prosecutors, these alleged crimes started back in 2014 and continued through 2021. His attorney says Adams is innocent.
Emails, text messages, or any corroboration whatsoever that the mayor knew about anything having to do with these campaign donations. The entire body of evidence is one staffer that says there was a conversation. What you have not learned is that that staffer has lied.
Adams was released on the condition that he does not discuss the case with witnesses or people listed in the indictment. The mayor will be back in court next Wednesday when his attorney says he plans to file a motion to dismiss the charges. Sharon.
So, Robert, Adams says he's innocent, but yet there are still calls for the mayor to step down. What can you tell us about that?
Right. For now, Mayor Adams says he's not going anywhere, but that could change, Sharon. New York Governor Kathy Hochul has the authority to remove him. However, she hasn't exercised that power. She did, however, call on the mayor to, quote, find an appropriate path forward. If the position temporarily, the Democrat would then schedule a special election for New Yorkers to select a new mayor.
All right, we'll continue to follow this. Robert Guadarrama, thanks.
You bet.
Vice President Kamala Harris made a high-stakes visit to the southern border Friday as she looks to counter criticism over the Biden administration's handling of immigration. A recent poll also shows Trump has a slim lead in the key swing state of Arizona. Spectrum's national reporter Evan Kozloff is in Washington with more.
Vice President Kamala Harris set to be in Arizona on Friday, going to the city of Douglas along the Mexico border. A senior campaign official telling Spectrum News that she planned to call for a series of new border measures, including the hiring of 1,500 border agents that were part of the sweeping bipartisan border security bill that died when former President Donald Trump urged Republicans to kill the bill so he could keep running on the border issue. But at a campaign event in Michigan on Friday, Trump pushed back, saying that bill was weak.
That's the worst bill ever drawn.
And blaming the Biden-Harris administration for the surge of migrants crossing the border, which hit record levels late last year.
Every state is a border state. You know what that means, right? Every state, because they fly them in. Can you imagine? They fly them in. These people are... I'm starting to think they're stupid. They're just stupid.
Polling shows that border security remains a liability for Harris.
Kamala Harris has never backed down from a challenge.
Her campaign launching a new ad timed to coincide with her border visit. It will air in Arizona and other battleground states.
You're playing with people's lives.
Back in Douglas, Arizona, City Councilwoman Danya Acosta, a political independent, told Spectrum ago because she supported his calls for better border security. She says she then voted for Biden in 2020 amid concerns over Trump policies that led to family separation at the border.
I can't support, the inhumane treatment of immigrants. I feel like it's just been politicized for, people's campaigns. And like I said, it's unfortunate.
And over the weekend, Harris is expected to go to a fundraiser in San Francisco before campaigning in Las Vegas, Nevada. Trump, meanwhile, is expected to speak at events in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. He's also expected to attend the Alabama-Georgia football game Saturday night. Reporting here in Washington, Evan Kozloff, Spectrum News.
We are just days away from the first and only vice presidential debates. Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance square off next Tuesday. You can watch all the action right here on Spectrum News starting at 8:45 Eastern. And following the debates, our political team will provide live Florida after Hurricane Helene makes landfall. We're on the ground with a look at the recovery efforts underway just ahead.
For the millions of school-age children across the country, the state of their schools can have a lasting impact on their health and well-being.
The majority of school districts aren't doing comprehensive regular water quality testing.
As CO2 levels rise in a space, cognitive function takes a direct decline.
We visit 2 school districts working to create safe and healthy environments for their students.
Watch Exploring Your Health, Curing Our Classrooms. Available on the Spectrum News app.
Never have to worry about thinking too big? Because you have a connection that's ready for anything. That's Life Unlimited. That's Spectrum.
I tell my son, I love you every single day. I love you. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, "I love you" to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious moment.
Food isn't just fuel to live, it's fuel to grow. My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. The Feeding America network of food banks helps millions of people put food on the table. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger, and together we can open endless possibilities for people to thrive. Visit feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Back to your weather on the ones. You know, a lot was made about the 2024 hurricane season. It was supposed to be one for the books, one for the record books as far as a well above average season. Well, you know, we've been talking about it, a very slow start to the hurricane season, but the month of September, unfortunately, has delivered. We had Gordon, we had Francine earlier in the month. We just had Helene, so Joyce way out in the Atlantic. Neither one of those storms seems to pose a threat. I'm going to be watching again very closely. Now, this is the same spot where Helene developed down in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. That could be something we have to watch here in the coming days. So, yes, we are now about halfway through the list of names, and if this holds, if this trend continues to hold, we may reach those expected outcomes that we thought, a well above average season. Kirk, Leslie, and then Milton would be the next names on the list. So far, though, over the next several days, very quiet weather, except for the areas right in the middle of the country where the remnants of Helene will sit. Very zonal flow, which means not a whole lot of change in our weather pattern. There may be some cooler air in the northern tier of states, but it's all going to be the remnants of Helene. This is Sunday into Monday. Helene's area of low pressure will spin in the Ohio River Valley and drag a cold front through Florida. They could see a few more showers and storms down there, but nothing serious, nothing tropical, and nothing to cause any more flooding concerns. So that's some good news. But as the mid-Atlantic states and the Ohio River Valley, as that area of low pressure continues to spin. Past Saturday and Sunday, maybe another inch or two of rain. When it's all said and done, the 5-day rainfall totals in the Ohio Valley could reach 2, 3, maybe even 4 inches, with some isolated higher amounts across the Blue Ridge Mountains in West Virginia and in Virginia. Temperatures on Sunday as we round out the weekend. Very warm in the midsection of the country in the Intermountain West. 91 Denver, 93 Billings. Phoenix is back in the 100-degree territory once again. And on Monday, the last day of September, it's not going to feel very fall-like with 80s and 90s to the midsection of the country, but some cooler weather in the northwest. And if you're looking for some fall-like temperatures into next week, the first few days of October, well, look toward the eastern side of the country. More heat building in the west, so no more fall temperatures out there anytime soon.
As Helene moves in, Lassie, located roughly 50 miles from the eye of the storm's landfall. And that's where we find Spectrum's Jason Delgado, who's on the ground speaking to residents who are now rebuilding.
There are roughly 53,000 residents here in Tallahassee without power as of Friday morning. That's according to the city. Now, there's a few reasons for that, but perhaps the biggest one are all these trees. Hurricane Helene ripped through the Big Bend and even brought strong winds throughout Tallahassee, tearing down trees. One of those trees nearly struck Julia Monsanto's apartment. She rode out the storm elsewhere with a friend.
I will. Yes, I will probably leave Tallahassee this time. We've gotten lucky several times, and I think it might run out soon.
Meanwhile, others aren't as lucky. This tree, it crushed a Jeep. It also clipped a nearby apartment. Samantha Stevens was standing just feet away when...
We might consider evacuation a little bit more seriously, especially just when there's a few more trouble trees up there, so we want to be safe.
Cleanup here could take days or weeks. Crews here are busy clearing debris and removing downed lines. Well, as of Friday afternoon, the city says they've restored power back to 77% of its customers. The goal here is to get that number up to 90% by Saturday evening. That's the latest in Tallahassee. Jason Delgado, Spectrum News.
Take a look at this. The U.S. Coast Guard are releasing new video Friday showing the dramatic moments a man and his dog were rescued near Sanibel Island in Florida. Check this out. The man's sailboat became disabled and began taking on water as Hurricane Helene made its approach to Florida. There you see the man and his dog. Oh my. Video shows a Coast Guard member descending into the choppy ocean from a helicopter to reach the man and dog. Once close enough, the pair were clipped into a rescue. The pair are in good medical condition. Wow. Check this out. As Hurricane Helene flooded the streets of Georgia, video taken after the storm shows residents using canoes to travel on flooded streets. The storm entered Georgia as a Category 2 hurricane, causing more than 1.1 million power outages statewide. I'm Sharon Tazwell. Thanks for watching. Our Spectrum News in 90 is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us.
Friday nights, The Big Deal with Errol Lewis, where Spectrum News' local political journalists break down the most important issues shaping our nation.
Or national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices exclusively on Spectrum.
At Spectrum Enterprise, we give over 80% of the Fortune 500 the technology solutions they need to meet their growing business demands. Whether it's ultra-fast connectivity, seamless transactions, safe and secure data, or reliable always-on technology, these businesses demand better, and we're here to deliver it. Get a network you can rely on with our 100% uptime SLA guarantee.
The warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce. We all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/team up.
Sometimes in life, in order to move forward, it helps to look back. To learn from the pioneers and trailblazers.
To gain inspiration from those who came before us.
To show us what it means to act with empathy and to show that love has no labels.
Join WWE and Love Has No Labels throughout the year in celebrating people from all communities and heritages.
Because when love has no labels, that's a love we can all fight for.
Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the